Alright, what's going on everyone out there on YouTube? NES Ruler, and welcome to a brand new review. And this time we'll be checking out a film that was sent to me to review by the Criterion collection, and you can pick this up right now on Blu-ray and DVD. And it's a film from the country of Japan from the year 1959, and directed by my opinion, the greatest Japanese filmmaker who ever lived. And that is a film titled Good Morning, directed by Ozu. Now, if you don't know who Ozu is, you definitely should dig into his filmography. When I was in film school and I was taking a lot of film criticism classes, I really got into Ozu and his films. And the thing with Ozu is that he is known for a genre called family dramas in Japan. It's a very popular genre, and he would basically just make films revolving around issues that would go on in these small villages in Japan within different groups of families and how they interact with each other. And it's very interesting simply because of the fact that Ozu is able to tell this story in a very concrete and interesting way without doing things like camera movement. You never see the camera pan or tilt or anything like that. He's a very static director in the sense that he'll show an establishing shot, and then we'll see a character in a medium shot, and then he'll turn the camera around and get the reaction from the character he's talking about. And we never see the camera ever move throughout most of his films, and it's very interesting. And that's what I really like about him, because the space is really tiny. You know, he has a frame that's very tiny in the sense that we never see more than, let's say, between two buildings. We never see more between those two buildings. We just see the image that's in between them, because he never moves the camera. But the way that he positions the characters within the frame is very interesting, and I think it definitely stands out from his style, and I really appreciate what he tries to do with his sense of telling character stories without having to throw in all the great pans and tilts and all that kind of things. All he needs is interesting characters with a good story, and he was able to tell it. And, you know, like I said, he's known for these family dramas. Films like Tokyo Story and Late Spring are his two most well-known films. And those films revolve more around a deeper message, a very unfortunate narrative within the family that he's telling the story with. And this film, Good Morning, it has a little bit of a lighter heart to it. It's definitely his lighter heart film that he made during his career. Unfortunately, he died in 1963, so he only lived for 60 years, which is unfortunate, but his career still stands as one of the greatest filmmakers who ever lived. Now, this movie is a really fun and interesting film because we follow two young boys in a post-war Japanese village who refuse to speak to their parents after they say no to buying them a TV set. And Ozu just carries the narrative through with that simple message of kids not agreeing with their parents who grew up in a pre-war Japan. Because these kids are, you know, they're growing up in a time where electronic boom is exploding in Japan. They have things like television sets and washing machines and things like that. And their parents don't understand that because they haven't grew up with these things. And the way that Ozu is able to tell a conflict between two different generations is really what makes this film shine. Because there's not much to it, to be completely honest. It's just two kids who not speaking anymore to their parents, and the interactions between the different groups of parents in this village. And that's basically it. But you know, the way that Ozu is able to make you stay interested in this narrative, even though it's not that compelling, is by doing things like I talked about before, by not moving the camera and being very experimental in the sense that this is a very, like I said, simple movie, and people who are usually watchers of Ozu films aren't typically used to watching a film that he's not saying a million different kind of things about society. But he is saying stuff, you know, like I said, the messages that he throws between about the older generation having to learn to adjust to this new electronic boom is very interesting. And it's really well done, and that's what I love about him and his movie. He always has a really interesting message And this film is beautiful. You know, he shot it in Technicolor, which just acts absolutely amazing. And like I said, it's a very condensed space that he takes place in this village. He basically just hops from house to house to house to all these different families who live in this village. And we go outside, like I said, frame between two buildings, and that's it. So it's a very plain and looking film, but he's still able to make it interesting. And that's what I really, really appreciate about Ozu. And it's just a funny movie. There's a lot of subtle humor in between this movie. The kids fart a lot throughout the entire film. That's a running gag, that the kids fart. And, you know, the older generation usually says good morning to each other when they're greeting each other in the morning. But the kids don't do that. Instead of saying good morning, they fart. And that's another thing that's very funny that I think Ozu is trying to say about the older generation and the younger generation. One says hello and good morning and very talkative and respectful, and the other group just farts. And that's how they say hello to each other. And it's a very funny gag throughout the entire film. So overall, you know, if you're not familiar with Ozu's films, I highly recommend you check them out. They're just amazing character pieces that revolve around families. And I know some of you guys probably think that sounds boring, but it's really compelling. And the fact that the actors, who are basically the studio actors for the period, do a really fantastic job. And I have a really great blast with this one, revisiting it on Blu-ray. Like I said, I watched it in film school, but coming back and watching it on Blu-ray, I really enjoyed it. And the transfer from Criterion is just absolutely amazing, as always. It looks fantastic. It's a 4K restoration, and you could tell that they put a lot of work into it, as always. And the sound is, of course, as good as always. And the bonus features, we have the original short that Ozu did in 1932, titled I Was Born But. And this is what this film is based off of. That film has a very similar premise about, you know, a pre-war group of kids getting along with their parents. So it's very interesting to see the two from, you know, the parents in this film as kids and how they had to battle their parents. Like I said, they're not connected. This film is basically just a modern remake of that story, but it's still very interesting to watch and see the comparisons that Ozu carries over from that short into this film. So it's very interesting to see that, and I appreciate that Criterion included this on this release. And it's a brand new soundtrack. It sounds awesome. So it's very interesting and well done. So I appreciate that. And then we have, of course, with every Criterion release, we have a awesome essay by, my opinion, the second greatest Chicago film critic who ever lived, Jonathan Rosenbaum. If you guys aren't familiar with his work, then you probably shouldn't be film fans, because he just is one of the most amazing film analysis writers who ever lived, in my opinion. Luckily, I've had the privilege of talking to the guy and listening to him speak, and he's a really great guy and a really smart dude. I had the privilege of listening to him talk about Paul Thomas Anderson's film The Master when I was in film school, and he's just this is a really smart guy. So if you guys haven't read any of his work, I highly recommend you seek it out, because it's really great. And he just talks about Ozu some more and his motifs and his film style and things like that. But like I said, I highly recommend you check out some of his other films. Criterion has released them as well, but this one is really great. Happy this finally sees a Blu-ray release. So that is my review of Good Morning from the year 1959. If you guys like this review, please give it a thumbs up. As always, you can follow me on Twitter at twitter.com/NESRuler22. Hope everybody's doing well. I'll talk to you guys soon. See you guys.